I want to be a farmer on a small farm, about a plough gang in a pleasant country under the auspices of a good landlord. To find a farm where one can live at all is not easy. I have taken a farm on the banks of the Nith, and in imitation of the old patriarchs, get men servants and maid servants, flocks and herds, and beget sons and daughters. And so, farewell to rakery.
The son of a tenant farmer, Robert Burns knew an early life of labour and poverty. He was 29 years old when he arrived to take up his lease at Ellisland Farm on June 11, 1788. He was in his prime and full of romantic optimism at his new venture. The publication of his poetry had brought him fame and a little capital. Burns, the heaven-taught ploughman, had been the toast of Edinburgh society, where he was introduced to the great and the good. Despite this success, he decided to return to his roots, to farm, and to marry Jean Armour, the country girl who had already borne him 2 sets of twins. The future looked promising, but just in case his country dreams crumbled, he had completed his training to become an exciseman. A farm without a farmhouse. Ellisland was run down and badly neglected. The stony, unimproved soil was more suited to growing wildflowers than to growing crops. He had been offered other, more productive farms, but the setting on the banks of the Nith appealed to Burns's romantic spirit. Ellisland was the poet's choice.
The banks of the Nith are as sweet, poetic ground as I ever saw.
His new landlord, Patrick Miller of Dalswinton, had given him £300 to build a farmhouse. The farming equipment, stock and crops were to be bought from the profits of his poetry, but he had already given half his capital to his brother Gilbert to save him from bankruptcy. His generosity had left him perilously short of funds.
This is the 3rd day that I have sojourned in these regions, the sole inmate of a smoky Spence. My farm gives me a good many uncouth cares and anxieties, but I hate to use the language of complaint. Job, or some of his friends, says, well, why should any living man complain?
One of the first tasks he had to set his mind to was to enclose the land by building field dikes. But his thoughts often took him in a different direction. To Jean, who was still waiting to join him from Ayrshire.
Oh, the earths the wind can blaw, I dearly loo the west, for there the bonny lassie lives, the lassie I loo best. There's wildwoods grow and rivers row, and mony a hill atween. But day and night my fancy's flecht is ever wee my Jean.
With his 3 hired hands, he gathered the first meagre harvest. They cut the corn while he worked behind them, tying the sheaves and building the stooks.
My dearest love, I received your letter with pleasure, which no letter but one from you could have given me. I dreamed of you the whole night last, but alas, I fear it will be 3 weeks yet ere I can hope for some happiness of seeing you. My harvest is going on. I have some to cut down still, but I put in 2 stacks today, so I'm as tired as a dog.
The harvest showed what a poor bargain Ellisland was. While he worked, Burns thought of an underhand solution. but it would need the help of one of his influential friends.
Sir, your honourable board, some time ago, gave me my excise commission, which I regard as my sheet anchor in life. My farm is in the last stages of worn-out poverty and will take me some time before it can pay the rent. I live here, sir, in the very centre of a country excise division. The present officer, owing to some legacies, is quite opulent. A removal could do him no manner of injury. It would suit me to enter on it, beginning of next summer. I have the honour to be, sir, your deeply indebted, humble servant, Robert Burns.
The rhythm of farming life and nature, combined with his rural isolation, was to inspire some of his finest verse.
Should all acquaintance be forgot, and never brought to mind, should all acquaintance be forgot, and days o' lang syne.
The year soon turned. Ploughing started on Candlemas, the 16th of February. The poet was reunited with the plough and was once again about a plough gang.
My father was a farmer upon the Carrick border, and carefully bred me in decency and order, to plough and sow, to reap and mow. My father bred me early, for when he said to labour, bread was a match for fortune fairly.
Jean joined him from Ayrshire, and after many delays the farmhouse was finally ready. Despite his apparent happiness at the change in his domestic situation, he was at pains to justify his marriage to a simple country girl to his literary friends.
Circumstanced as I am, I could never have got a female partner for life who could have entered into my favourite studies, relished my favourite authors, and without entailing me at the same time, expensive living, fantastic caprice. I have got the handsomest figure, the sweetest temper, the soundest constitution, and the kindest heart in the country.
Sowing started at the beginning of March.
I was at a very early hour, sowing in the fields. I heard a shot. And presently, a poor little hare limped by me, apparently very much hurt. You can easily guess this set my humanity in tears, and my indignation in arms. Inhuman man, curse on thy barbarous art, and blasted be thy murder-aiming eye. May never pity soothe thee with a sigh, nor ever pleasure glad thy cruel heart. Seek, mangled wretch, some place of wonted rest. No more of rest, but now thy dying bed. The sheltering rushes whistling o'er thy head, the cold earth with thy bloody bosom pressed.
The summer of 1789 was a happy time for the Burns household. He received news that he had been appointed as riding officer for the excise in the Upper Nithsdale Division. Bobby, their first and only surviving son, was reunited with his parents, and on the 18th of August, Jean gave birth to another son, Francis Wallace Burns.
I know the word exciseman, or still more opprobrious, gauger, will sound in your ear. I too have seen the day when my auditory nerves would have felt very delicately on this subject. But a wife and children are things that have a wonderful power in blunting these kinds of sensations. £50 a year for life, and a provision for widows and orphans, you will allow, is no bad settlement for a poet.
Excise was a tax on home-produced goods. It was an unpopular tax, and excisemen were unpopular people. Known as a gauger, the exciseman calculated or gauged the amount of duty to be paid on a whole range of goods such as tanning, tea and tobacco, coffee and candles, silks, soap and spirits. Burns started his new career on the 7th of September 1789. He was responsible for the overseeing of the 10 parishes of Upper Nithsdale. His instructions were to pay irregular and surprise visits on the multitude of small traders of his area to check they were paying their full excise taxes.
The worst of it is, the excise division which I have is so extensive. No less than 10 parishes to ride over, and besides abounds with so much business that I can scarce steal a spare moment. Searching auld wives' barrels, och on the day, that clarty barm should stain my laurels. But what'll ye say? These moving things, cad wives and wains, wad move the very hearts o' stains.
At first, the work was arduous but not unpleasant. But with the onset of winter, the hardship of riding began to tell.
5 days a week, or 4 at least, I must be on horseback and very frequently ride 30 or 40 miles ere I return, besides 4 different kinds of bookkeeping to post every day.
Although Jean was not a farmer's daughter, she was to prove to be a good farmer's wife. Contrary to popular belief, Burns did not lack ability as a farmer. When his excise duties required him to be absent for long hours, he switched from arable to dairy farming so that Jean could supervise the milking and cheese making. It was Burns who introduced the higher-yielding Ayrshire cattle to the area. One of the most unpopular jobs on the farm was flailing, separating the grain from the stalk by beating it with a hinged stick, the flail, the weary flinging tree. The unrelenting workload of the excise and the grinding physical toil on the farm would have taxed the strength of a healthy man, but Burns was far from robust.
My nerves are in a damnable state. I feel that horrid hypochondria pervading every atom of my body and soul. This farm has undone my enjoyment of myself. It is a ruinous affair on all hands. But let it go to hell. I'll fight it out and be off with it.
The deal's a wa, the deal's a wa, the deal's a wa with excise man. He's danced a wa, he's danced a wa, he's danced a wa with excise man.
In July 1790, Burns joined the Dumfries division of the excise. This boosted his salary to a comfortable £70 per annum and involved a short ride into Dumfries rather than the endless miles in that hard-hearted stone of a saddle. It was the tale of another farmer returning home on horseback that was to inspire one of his greatest works.
When chapman billies leave the street, and Ruthie neighbours meet, as market days are wearing late, and folk begin to tack the gate, while we sit boozing at the nappy, and getting foo and unco happy, we think na on the lang Scot smiles, the mosses, waters, slaps and stiles.
Burns recognised that Tam O'Shanter possessed a polish that he despaired of ever excelling. He never did.
I am giving up my farm. It is a bad bargain. The excise, after all that has been said against it, is the business for me. So much for farming. I wish to God I'd never engaged in it.
Dogged by fatigue and poor health, it is all the more remarkable that his 3 years at Ellisland were to be the most fertile and productive of his literary career. He somehow managed to maintain a huge correspondence and compose some of his most accomplished songs and letters. Over 230 of his letters and some 130 poems and songs date from this period. Burns's time on the banks of the Nith had been like many things in his life, a mixture of inspiration and heartache. Farming had been a cruel mistress. The Ellisland years had taken their toll. But they left a precious legacy, a harvest of inspiration.
To know myself has been all along my constant study. I weighed myself alone. I balanced myself with others. I watched every means of information, how much ground I occupied as a man and as a poet. Fortune has so much forsaken me that she has taught me to live without her, and amid my ragged poverty, I am as independent and much more happy than a monarch of the world. And I will indulge the flattering faith that my poetry will considerably outlast my poverty.
And for auld lang syne, my Jo, for auld lang syne, we'll tak a cup o' kindness yet, for auld lang syne.